In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found no proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson. This week on the show, we will take you from the virtual Burning Man playa of BRCvr to a chat with the author of Tamara, the original hit immersive play, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary with a new printing of the text that dropped just this month. That, plus we check in with Scott Stein of CNET, bring you an all-new Immersive 101 and the pick of the week, all of which is brought to you by our amazing Patreon backers. Help the cause at patreon.com/noproscenium. But first, headlines.
Hello, this is Catherine Yu, Executive Editor of No Proscenium, and here's what's in the Immersive headlines for August 13th. Behind the scenes of the fall of Georgia's Serenbe Playhouse, Niantic tells us we're getting the Metaverse wrong, progress on Punchdrunk's new home in London, and a report about the future of theater from Sundance. First off, a lengthy expose from Jim Farmer in American Theater reveals unsafe working conditions, racial insensitivity, sexual harassment, and more at Serenbe Playhouse located outside of Atlanta. In the article, several former cast and crew members describe the hostile work environment created by an abusive creative director and the board who turned the other way at his behavior. The now former creative director of the company departed in fall of 2019 and, oddly enough, has moved to Florida, where he is now running for office as a self-declared Trump-loving Republican. The Serenbe organization has also since rebranded itself. Previously, this outdoor theater company was best known for creating productions with a whole lot of spectacle, including a staging of Miss Saigon with a real helicopter landing. Next up, hot on the heels of the Ariana Grande concert in Fortnite, Niantic CEO John Hanke tells us we are all getting the Metaverse wrong. It's not about the latest walled garden from Roblox or Facebook, or even the multiplayer VR escape as depicted in Ready Player One. Says Hanke, quote, "As a society, we can hope that the world doesn't evolve into the kind of place that drives sci-fi heroes to escape into a virtual one, or we can work to make sure that doesn't happen," end quote. In the essay, Hanke goes on to describe a world where you can overlay your favorite IP onto everything around you using augmented reality. The blog post also coincides with a recent Pokemon Go fan protest regarding accessibility in the game after Niantic announced it would raise the minimum distance required to interact with a Pokestop or gym back to pre-pandemic levels. Those against the change note that the current design allows more people, including disabled players, to safely participate. Next, in a presentation to some local councilors, it looks like Punchdrunk's upcoming move to Woolwich's Royal Arsenal is progressing nicely. The popular theater company will be moving its London headquarters into buildings 17, 18, and 19 across from the new Woolwich Works venue. Punchdrunk's renovations were slightly delayed by the pandemic, but the plan is to open 2 of these buildings to the public in spring. The company's new lease will be for 5 years. Sundance has also just released the results of an independent study about the future of theater and live performance. It's called Emerging from the Cave. The study consisted of interviews with over 70 artists and arts workers, analyzing their experiences during the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter uprising in 2020. Among the findings identified are a greater need for collective leadership in theater, more holistic support of artists, potential around cross-disciplinary and hybrid artistic practices, which also include technology, and the need for the field itself to start having big collective discussions about its future. And lastly, in a fun promotion for Reese's Puffs, the cereal's new packaging allows you to make your own augmented reality drum machine at the breakfast table. Simply place some of the cereal pieces on the back of the limited edition box and open up their custom web AR app. The music generated by the app changes with the placement of the cereal pieces. So if anybody out here is laying down some sick cereal beats, please do let us know. And these have been your Immersive Headlines.
Joining us now is Doug Jacobson, the Chief Creative Officer and co-founder, along with Athena Demos, of BRCvr, the virtual Burning Man event that happens inside Altspace VR. BRCvr won a Producers Guild Award for its 2020 edition, which was part of the Virtual Burn Week last year, and it returns next weekend for the 2021 Virtual Burn Week. Longtime readers and listeners also know it was one of our favorite things of 2020, and we're looking forward to getting back out into the digital dust. Doug, thank you for joining us on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Before we get into this year's event, or even last year's for that matter, BRCvr was in development long before COVID was a gleam in the devil's eye. What was the spark in the first place?
Way back in 2015, a guy I know named Greg Edwards had made a sort of single-player Google Cardboard virtual playa. And he had teamed up with Athena back then, and they pitched it to Burning Man, and I guess Burning Man loved it, but didn't know what to do with it back then. And so he put it on the shelf, essentially. Last year, as COVID started hitting, I started thinking, like, we should all be hanging out in VR. And I had an Oculus Go, and I started going into various platforms. And I had a birthday coming up, and I thought, well, the way things are going, my birthday, maybe I'll start throwing parties in VR, and then when my birthday comes around, I'll get all my friends in. So I started picking a platform to do this, and I went to VR Chat, and I went to Altspace, and I went to Big Screen, and a few others that I could get to on my Go at the time. And I just liked the vibe at Altspace, but and I just picked it. No more than just liking the vibe. And then so as I was hanging out in Altspace, going with my friend Lindsay, we were hanging out a lot in Altspace. I saw somebody had shot a photogrammic world, or and uploaded it to Altspace. It was janky, but it was pretty cool, and it made a light bulb go off in my head. I'm like, well, if I'm going to throw my birthday at this house we always throw my birthday at, what if we scan the house in VR and then threw the birthday virtually? Wouldn't that be cool? Okay, great. I know this guy with a Matterport camera, which is for photogrammic scanning. So I called up the guy. I was hoping to be Greg, and I said, hey, Greg, do you have an extra scan lying around I could test upload to see if this could work? And he said, yeah, and he sent me one. He said, why don't you try uploading my old Burning Man world? So I did, and he and I were standing on the playa together, and we realized this is kind of cool. Now we're together on playa as opposed to a solo experience.
Yeah.
I said, we'll just start working on this. And then a week later, Burning Man canceled, and then it was a rocket ride from then on. What we did not know was that Altspace that we picked, that I had just picked, the mythology is that it was purchased in a tent at Burning Man. And that a lot of the people who are involved in Altspace and that part of Microsoft are burners and have a camp called Playa Alchemist at Burning Man. So there was a really deep Burning Man connection already.
Yeah. And
the platform had some of that burner principles baked into it when it was invented by guy Gavin Whitty, I think.
So the Playa Alchemist camp in BRCvr, which is the Altspace camp and is like super built out, and feature heavy, as you say, that is a virtual manifestation of a real camp that had already existed, and that was the Altspacers' actual camp of the burn.
That's right.
Oh my goodness.
Playa Alchemist is a real camp. It is a pyramid, and if you Google it, you'll see what it looks like, and they've recreated it. They've had some flourishes, but they're like, hey, we're burners. We're going to go all out. And they did. And it's a beautiful, beautiful world in Altspace. So there was a lot of synergy there.
Yeah. Synergy and synchronicities.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It really feels like your objective was to capture the vibe of the burn. And that was like even more important than the look. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about capturing that feeling in a VR setup that can at times maybe feel like everyone's Playmobil people. There's nothing wrong with being Playmobil people, but like people tend to go default to like, I want to look realistic, but this feels realistic. How did you chase that?
Well, I think that, one of Athena's specialties is community, and both me and Athena and I, grammatically correct there. Have been going to Burning Man. I've been going since 98 and she since 99. And we knew this world cold. Like we knew all the inside jokes. We knew the little details already, and we knew, and we would all, and then we had other team members, Justin and other people who had been old school burners, and we were, oh, what if we had this thing in there? What if we put this in there? And so we started realizing that, we want to see, we were all this COVID virus coming around, we were feeling nostalgic for the burn of the past. And we really wanted to go get some pieces that we all loved from the past, because we had this rare opportunity to recreate them and put them into the playa. This is for the old school burners who come in to go, oh, I remember that piece. We had one piece called Helios, Kate Rodenbush made, burned in 2018, resurrected in the VR world. And, and it's just this kind of thing. And then also we realized people want to get together with their friends and go on adventures. And it's really hard to get together with your friends, go on adventures on a Zoom call.
Oh my God.
So
oh God, just the word alone.
It's tough.
That was the nightmare of this past year for me. It was like, I spent 5 years on a Monday morning Zoom call. And the minute the pandemic hit, everyone was like, we'll do immersive theater on Zoom. And I was like, was this designed to torture me specifically? This feels, it feels like I've been cursed
torture. It's globally tortureful.
Yeah. Who is the demon of Zoom calls? But when I was there, cause I have specific memories of BRCvr last year that were the first time that entire summer where I got to really hang out with my friends in the manner that I prefer, which is wandering around a large space and just trying to hold everybody together and maybe failing, but enjoying that push and pull of where's Ivan? Exactly. He's over there. Can someone go get him? No, you guys stay here. I'll go get him.
I know. I was so surprised. We were having the same conversations that I had on Playa. My solution on Playa for herding cats is that I buy the most powerful flashlight I could possibly find, and I put the beam up in the air, and the dust makes it shoot up, and everyone can follow me. And I always set waypoints okay, everybody, we're walking to, 8 o'clock in Esplanade, and that's where we're going. So if you make it there, that's great, kind of thing. And I found myself doing stuff like that on the virtual playa.
Yeah.
And then people doing, what is that? What's that thing? Well, I don't know. What's that thing? Let's go check it out. A lot of that as well.
Yeah. It's funny. It's once you've had, the spatial reality ripped away from you and everything's just flattened out into screens are the only way you're communicating with people, you start to realize that all the stuff that's so frustrating about herding cats is actually the thing that makes other people kind of enjoyable as entities.
Yeah, I know. And, it's funny because the experience on the VR headset versus the 2D screen, it's hard to get the translation looking at a 2D graphics. It looks like you're just walking around in a video game, So it looks like, from a couple of years ago. It's not even the latest graphics. It's, because we're paring it down into a VR headset. But once you strap on that headset and you look around and you walk, none of that matters. It feels good when you're in the headset, unless you get nauseous and then it doesn't feel so good. But what I mean is that you're fully immersed, and it's really challenging to translate that is, when I show video clips of us all hanging out in BRCvr, it looks like it doesn't quite translate the way, and Burning Man doesn't quite translate on a 2D screen either. I made a Burning Man doc called Journey of the Flames years ago, and always struggled, how do I capture Burning Man? How can we capture Burning Man? Every time I show the video, it's people that's really cool, but it doesn't quite hit like it was when you were there, because you're not looking around in 360 degree space and seeing stuff going on.
Yeah.
You're watching a 2D flat thing, and the VR gives you that, which is great.
We're coming up on time here, but what's on tap for this year's virtual burn at BRCvr?
This year, we are free again. We tried to do ticketing. It didn't work out. We just too many complications, and we thought, So we're gonna anyone can come in. We recommend you get in early, set up your account now. We already got stuff going on. We already have worlds up. Time to start, practicing getting in and learning is now at altvr.com. And then we're going to have a museum of all the temples. We had modelers volunteer to build temples, so we have all 20 or so temples. So from the past, and we have a little museum of all the man bases from 1986 on.
Wow!
So we're gonna have all the man bases, all the temples, and we're gonna have some. I'm focusing on hub worlds, which is sort of like scenes at Burning Man, because the main playa is sort of low polygon to fit it all on that thing, and then you get into a portal, and then you're at the piece of art that's higher polygon, higher res. Well, what if I make the background lower polygon, but put a bunch of high res stuff together so it feels like Burning Man? So we have these hub worlds where you'll be able to walk from Disorient to Decadent Oasis and hear music, and it's meant to be a structured space, but you see the whole city in the background and you feel like you're there rather than going and visiting just a solo art project. So I'm trying to make hub worlds.
Oh, cool.
And we're going to try to set up a green screen and green screen acts and bring them in. Our eyes are bigger than our stomach, though. We'll see how it goes.
But it's such a wonderful experiment, and just the number of things that got pulled off last year were kind of really amazing. So I'm glad you guys' eyes are still bigger than your stomach.
Yeah, well, wait till you see. We have a really great guy, John Riggs, working on El Pulpo Mecanico. It is epic. We're going to have the best version of that for the Playa, the octopus with the flames that everybody loves. It's going to be a really great car. So we have some really cool things. So, and whether the Delta variant comes in or not, or how many people show up or not, I just, it's hard for me to worry about all that, although I do. We're just going to have a great time and hang out with some great people and have fun no matter what happens, frankly.
I have one kind of ridiculous question for you.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. When you get back to the playa, will it be weird not to be able to fly?
We are really going to miss flying. However, we think that a couple of years of BRCvr is going to start affecting the playa, where we think that there's going to be people making emojis coming up, like heart emojis. We think people are going to redo the flight stick and hand out flight sticks. I think there's going to be a lot of cross virtual, and we're going to do hybrid. We're going to try to do things on playa that show up in our virtual world and vice versa. So we're hoping to hybrid the event next year. We have, again, our eyes are bigger than our stomach, but we're going to model up we should make 3D print some, flight sticks and hand them out to people. And some people will be like, what's this? Some people are like, I know what this is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Some people,
I can't wait.
Some people know. I want to. So,
so much. I love flying.
Oh my God. It's so much fun. All right. Well, Doug, thank you so much for giving us the brief history and a quick preview of BRCvr.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Doug and I talked for about, I think 20 or 30 minutes more after we closed off the first part of the interview. That will be dropping into the Patreon bonus feed in not too long. If you're interested, go ahead and check it out at patreon.com/noproscenium. It will be hitting, if nothing else, during the week of the virtual burn. We've come back to my favorite part of the show and yours, where Catherine Yu, executive editor of No Proscenium, brings us some Immersive 101. Hey, Catherine.
Hi, Noah. So good to be back.
What do you have for us this week?
So I was thinking we could discuss a very common format of immersive experiences known as the sandbox.
All right, the sandbox. I think we all know what a sandbox is. So it's something you play in when you're a kid. So how does that pertain to immersive, and why is it here with all of our theater stuff?
Right. So first off, some of the most famous immersive theater pieces use a sandbox format, like Sleep No More. It comes to us from the video game world. So think of an open world video game, a sandbox video game where you're not necessarily being explicitly directed what you're supposed to do next, where you're supposed to go. You're allowed to explore, linger if you want, speed through stuff if you want. So, for example, at the McKittrick Hotel, once you enter the experience, you can roam from room to room, you can open drawers, you can look at letters, and if you want to follow an actor, you can. And if you want to go with the crowd, you can. But also, if you want to explore to your heart's content, whatever catches your fancy, you can. So there's a lot less structure in this kind of experience because it's mimicking that open world feel, that open exploration feel, and it really allows the individual to choose their own path, to kind of curate their journey during the experience.
Now you say there's a lot less structure. So does that mean that just like anything's happening willy-nilly, or is it just that there's a lot less structure for you?
There's a lot less structure for you, the participant. So while the main action from a narrative standpoint might be on a specific schedule or timetable, you're not necessarily, as a participant, beholden to following what everyone else is doing at a particular moment in time.
So kind of go back to an earlier conversation of ours about agency, which if you haven't heard the show before, you can flip back a couple episodes and find. This sounds like you have a lot of agency in a sandbox.
Definitely. And more specifically, when we're thinking about the different flavors of agency, this is agency of focus, agency of perspective, agency of movement.
Right. Sometimes I think, coming from the video game world, we'll often call this, traversal agency. You can traverse around the space, which just means you can move about the space. But traversal sounds fun, so everyone uses
definitely. And
Spider-Man traverses through New York City. Mm-hmm.
The other thing to note is, even though you may be in a sandbox, the creators will often try to draw your attention towards big linchpin or tentpole events. And so it is still your choice whether or not you want to go, for example, look at the banquet table scene during Sleep No More. But if you want to ignore that, that is your prerogative.
Yeah. So much of it comes down to managing the audience's attention, and it becomes a challenge, but in so many ways it can often really pay off because from an audience perspective, at least my own experience of it, it always feels like you made the choice to be there.
Definitely. And if something catches your eye, if you see a performer like sprinting off somewhere, go and follow them to your heart's content. That's what a sandbox is great at.
All right. Anything else we should know about a sandbox before we let people go about their merry way?
I think one thing that is really interesting about the sandbox format is that you will see people who might be a little bit uncomfortable at first, and it kind of lets you dip your toe in the immersive waters before you go deeper.
All right. Well, you, dear listener, have full agency, so feel free to move about the cabin, and we'll be back next week with another Immersive 101. Thanks, Catherine.
Bing!
I'm David Spira from RoomEscapeArtist.com, and I'd like to invite you to our immersive gaming convention, Recon, the Reality Escape Convention. Recon is being held digitally this year, August 22nd and 23rd, and has programming and games for players, creators, and the immersive gaming curious. Basic access includes all of the talks as well as our ARG, and that ticket is pay what you want. Players should consider buying a Game Pass for access to tons of gaming content, much of which is only available through Recon. Those in the industry, adjacent industries, or are thinking about getting involved should pick up a pro ticket for access to live workshops, facilitated discussions, and other perks. This event is a labor of love, and we fuss about all of the details, from the featured talks down to our swag. I hope that you'll join us to learn and play. You can learn more at realityescapecon.com.
Once again, we've reached that part of the show where we check in with one of our friends from around the Immersiverse. This week, it's Scott Stein of CNET, who we haven't talked to in a while. Scott, how's it going?
Hey, I'm great. Good to talk to you.
I hear you're living in Samsung land right now.
I am. I've got watches on my wrist and phone in my pocket. I'm back in the smartwatch land, which always gives me a nostalgic feeling.
Well, we won't be going in depth on Samsung smartwatches right now, but I do want to talk about something else you've been doing for CNET lately. You did a big piece about the Metaverse, which, like Hansel, is so hot right now.
It is. I knew I had to do this at some point. I didn't know when, and it was some point where I was like, okay, I've just got to put down some thoughts on this and help at least explain it, because I think for all that I assume that people know what's going on, it's a buzzword. Most people start to glaze out on it. And I don't even know if I explained it right, but I did what makes sense to me.
So, I mean, what are people, cause how do I put this? I've had Metaverse as a term since the early 90s when it first showed up, and I just default to that definition. How are people kind of understanding it right now? And we've had Neil Stevenson on the show, and I asked him if people are using it right, and he was kind of like, well, I don't want to disappoint anybody.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Like he punted, but and he's the guy who made up the term. But like, how are people? Is there consensus? What are people doing with this thing right now? What's a metaverse?
Right. I think there's the literary philosophical discussion of what a metaverse is. And then there's what's going on right now with everyone talking about metaverses. And I feel that the latter is the one I'm most interested in, because also the names might change. Like, I feel like the internet, there's information superhighway. There were a lot of internet terms flying around when everything was taking off in the 90s. Maybe we're having that now where we don't know, AR, VR, XR. It gets people angry and fired up in the industry, where you say, this is the term, we've decided on the term, but like, it's still very early days. The metaverse, I think of it as helpful when I listen to it. Obviously Snow Crash, sure. People kind of blend it with, VR and, the Oasis and all that other stuff. I think it's showing up right now because more as a sign that not everybody's in VR. So I responded to it as a flag that, when Facebook talked about becoming a metaverse company or making the metaverse part of its Facebook reality labs, I look at that as all the other stuff they need to build / all the other people that are not in VR. Who knows if that's right, but I think it is.
Yeah. I mean, I always just think of it as like the digital shadow. Right? Like, if the spirit realm were bits and bobs, and like computerized, then that's what the metaverse would be. Like, I mean, I gotta admit, I walk around sometimes and just randomly think about the question. I wish I didn't, but I do.
It makes sense. It's like the digital twin. It's the counterpart, your alternate world. It's the digital twinning thing. But at the same time, what I think is going on, I think about the last year and the whole pandemic phase. And I wrote something last year thinking about this when everybody was starting to go really big on, VR is so cool again, going through these cycles. And I was more struck that the idea of virtual at that point has been continuously kind of redefined. If everything's virtual, not many people were talking about it for VR. And so at that point, you have everybody glomming theater, work, all these other things that are not. My kids playing Fortnite, all this other stuff, and whatever they're playing next. And I think that whole interconnected stuff constitutes virtual. My feeling is that Metaverse is trying to grasp that somehow. But yes, it also seems to me to be the social world. Like, you have these alt space VRs and rec rooms, and you've had these things for a while, Second Life and going way back, that seemed to me that the home that you live in, that you do things, that the place you go to is part of that. But it seems like the way it's being instituted now is the massive interconnectedness of it, and a place that you can go to outside of VR, but also to build a home that future AR stuff can tap into. This is like the bridge, in some ways.
Well, speaking of like AR, we were talking before we turned the microphones on, and you said something interesting about AR, and I wondered if you could like share that with the class, please. So,
yes. Well, it's summer anyhow, but it's been slow. And it's been slow for a while, but it just kind of strikes me. And I know companies have had all sorts of delays. There've been chip delays. There've been slowdowns, offices working remotely. It still does feel slow. And I think that we still at the cresting midway 21 don't see any AR headsets, not even consumer, but we don't really see any period that are around to try. Snapchat's AR glasses are a dev kit. And then you wonder, when will it happen? And then you look towards like Facebook's and announced that its product for the fall are those Ray-Ban smart glasses, which are clearly not going to be AR. I think they're going to be less than you might expect, but they're also claiming they'll have some element of connecting you, I guess, is the conversation. But
I had missed that actually. Like, is there going to be display function, or is it going to be audio like the Bose were that got pulled off the market?
We don't really know everything at all. We know very little. They've been sort of just teasing bits, but I think it's going to be audio. Like Facebook's been playing in audio now for the past year, been interested in audio. Audio was also talked about as like a key step. Like we've talked this, we had noticed in XR, spatial audio for all that is key. It seems like a very attainable goal, and is right now for AR more so than visual. And so I think that I think that's where they're going to use it, maybe as an explorational tool for that. Maybe I would imagine to have spatial audio and do something interesting there, but who knows? Yeah, it's weird. But looking at that and thinking of that as kind of a stepping stone, and then how many more products do we have until we get to the AR glasses, makes me wonder, what is AR going to be for people? It's still something that people hear about, but they don't really have a firm grasp of, even after all this time. And I think that while the experiments are very interesting, then we go to, like, speaking of the metaverse, Niantic has been making acquisitions. They bought a 3D scanning company, scanning app at Scaniverse. This is interesting to me because I feel like that whole 3D scanning landscape keeps dovetailing with people trying to map the world and do it collaboratively to get sort of like a grid to agree upon and play on.
Yeah.
The glue of it still seems to be very much at play, and everyone's trying to figure their way out of it. On a side note, Niantic CEO had a whole commentary on the metaverse himself, and it was kind of funny, only because when I read it, it was positioning AR as separate from the supposedly dystopic metaverse. I say supposedly dystopic because I don't think that's been determined yet. I think the idea, there have been commentaries, in my opinion, the metaverse being by its concept dystopic. I think, to me, it's like cyberspace,
Yeah.
Like that would be like saying the internet by its definition is dystopic. I don't know. I guess you could do it for all technology.
It's funny. It's like, Gibson tried to warn us. Stevenson tried to warn us. Klein said it was a party. Two of those guys turned out to be right. I guess you can figure out which one was wrong by doing the math. But I also think of, say, like, Doug Rushkoff, like in the 90s, being very bullish on what the internet was going to do for all of us. And then the Doug Rushkoff, by the time Occupy Wall Street comes along, being very bearish on what the internet has done to us.
Yeah.
When we look at the media theory of it all.
Well, then also the whole idea of AR, it's not AR versus the metaverse, or he was talking about John Hanke was talking about reality channels and the way that works and connecting us more to the real world. I think that was the same debate that was happening with smartwatches, with Google Glass, with a lot of tech about connecting us more, digital assistants. It's funny because when I hear the metaverse conversation lately, and we think about, some people leap right to Ready Player One, a lot of people leap right to Ready Player One, the idea that you're escaping to this other world. To me, the metaverse, again, because so much of it now is about something that can exist outside of VR, I actually feel like it's reaching for tools and glue that aren't purely in your own blindered world. I think that the metaverse conversation is trying to get to like all of your laptop tools, all your phone tools, all your things like that. And if that's what the metaverse is partially about, that does not seem like you're living entirely in its walls. So I think that's where the metaphor doesn't really apply as we're thinking about it.
I never think of it as a walled garden. I never have since the beginning. I've always thought of it again like it's like the digital twin, and that what makes it intriguing is the degree of fidelity. Like if I'm walking up to the comic book store, and the comic book store's digital twin is also available to me, and maybe I could be at the comic book store fully by remote, or I could be at the comic book store physically. But if I enter into the comic book store physically use AR tools there, that I could also experience the data layer of the comic book store. I went to the comic book store today. That's why I'm saying the comic book store. And I was thinking about the metaverse while I was walking to the comic book store. So like, it's just, this is in mind. But like thinking about like, what would it mean that, that the sort of flash frozen in time data, so I could like scroll backwards to see what I missed last week, kind of like flipping through like on the timeline.
It seems like a big part, or all of your data. And I think ecosystem, you're right, like walled garden, it's not necessarily walled garden, yet at the same time, there's a huge ecosystem play where every company that's in it is playing for an ever larger ecosystem of stuff. And this has been happening already with the big players in tech. Outside of this, I think it's part of that. It's interesting. There have been comments about, Facebook, that this is important to them because they never had the phone OS. Now this may be a reality, metaverse OS. I think it's also interesting because Microsoft in ways like that too, where Microsoft never really had the phone landscape, but they're also looking, they're very active in AR and Microsoft Mesh. Maybe that's why Google and Apple are a little calmer with this, because in a sense, if you think of the interconnected glue of our like ambient lives or whatever, like the phones have it and they're sitting pretty. And so in a sense, they don't have to reinvent very much because they already are in your pocket. And maybe that's why the thought is to kind of glom that, and others are trying to reinvent it. I don't know. I do think it expands way beyond headsets. That's where it gets interesting. And that's why I think everyone's kind of drawing new umbrellas over everything.
Well, we could go on this one at length, but I think we'll check back in a few months and see where the conversation has gone. Before we head out, a little bit of dessert for everybody. Anything nifty that folks in the community might want to keep their eye on?
Yeah, I'm really excited about things that are not on my head. Actually, gaming, there's a lot of handheld gaming systems coming out this fall. And I find that really interesting. I think it's meaningful in some way, even though a lot of them are delayed from previous ones. Panic Playdate is one that I'm super excited about, but I've not yet tried. It's a little crank-enabled, bespoke headset by the same game studio that made Untitled Goose Game, and it's interesting because it delivers these games as a subscription that's all inclusive with the purchase of it, and they pop up like little surprises on the handheld. And what it made me think of in so many ways is in the past year, all these like theater pieces that send you a mystery box, or an escape room in a box, or the magic of these interactive items that you can explore at home and be immersed in. And I think that there's immersive magic in that. I think the Playdate sounds immersive in its own little special way. And I think it's an interesting thought about like where you can strive for like home connection to people beyond just something that goes on your eyes. And maybe I'm stretching a bit too far, but I think people still want to hunger for that. People are going to have a hard time traveling still. And also the world's changing. So I think it's like, I like that Playdate model. Like I kind of want to see more games and experiences that have a little magic inventiveness to them.
Yeah, more touch points for everybody. So, Scott, thank you for giving us some stuff to chew on for the weekend.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to be sitting here playing with tech at home because I'm not traveling.
When people want to follow what you're up to, where should they go?
You should check me out at CNET. You can also follow me on Twitter at JetScott. I'm always chattering about whatever I'm thinking about there. Currently reading a book on smells called Nosedive, which is fantastic.
There's more of the show on the way, including our interview with John Krazank, the author of Tamara, and the pick of the week. Right now, we want to take a moment to thank our latest backers, Cami Pinto and Adam Jacobs, who by subscribing gain access to the backer-only podcast feed and our growing video library. But cash isn't the only way you can help us. The number one thing you can do is share this podcast and our weekly review rundown on social. I know. It can feel ridiculous. I feel ridiculous saying it, but there's nothing like word of mouth, and you have a lot more agency than the algorithm leads you to believe. So, if you like this, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at NoProscenium, and Instagram at @No_Proscenium, and hit that share button when the time comes. It really does make a world of difference.
Hi, this is Patrick McLean, the Chicago curator with No Proscenium. I'm here to introduce this week's pick of the week. Every week we meet in Discord for Review Crew, where we talk about experiences or events we have recently seen, which you can hear that podcast in your feed right before this one. It's a partner to the review rundown on the site where we talk about all the stuff we've been seeing and enjoying. And this week we have to talk about the pick of the week is...
Hi, this is Laura Hess, the arts editor.
And what is the pick of the week you have for us?
The pick of the week this time is an art exhibition called Divine Immersion, the experiential art of Nick Dong, and it's at the USC Pacific Asia Museum in Pasadena, California.
What makes this the pick of the week for you?
This is the pick of the week because this exhibition is a series of sculptures and spaces. As it mentions in the title, it is truly immersive and interactive. It's a series of moments almost more than it is anything else. And it is incredibly joyful, it's incredibly restorative, and it's something that anyone in or near the LA area, I think, should run and not walk to see.
Awesome. And how long is this currently running and how much does it cost?
So this is currently running until October 3rd. Cost, depending upon day and whether you're a student or whether you're a senior, anywhere from free to $10. And the one thing that I really want to cite about this is that Nick Dong, who's an Oakland-based Taiwanese-American artist, has a core philosophy around his work where the work can only be truly complete when the viewer activates it with their energy. So this is not interactive just in a practical way. There is a real exchange of energy that you can feel when you are there, moving through these sculptures, these interactive spaces, these rooms. And it is transcendent. There's no other way for me really to describe it. It is transcendent.
Well, I'm definitely jealous that I can't make it out there, but I really appreciate you taking the time to go experience it and talk about it on the podcast with us.
It's my pleasure. Go see it, everybody.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Patrick.
Joining us now, we have the honor of having author John Krizanc, the writer of Tamara, which this year is celebrating its 40th anniversary. The play has the distinction of still being the longest running play to ever run in Los Angeles, and it is a precursor to all of the immersive work that we know. John, I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
When you and director Richard Rose first dreamt up this production, what were your touchstones, or were you fully in the wilderness on a play that had all these moving parts and the audience could follow what characters they wanted to follow and switch tracks? Because this was mostly unprecedented at the time.
Yeah, I think, there were a few things like I think Marie Irene Fornés in New York had done some, like, what I would call environmental plays, that they weren't interactive plays. I mean, Tamara came about really by accident. It was a sort of a drunken afternoon, to be quite frank. I remember it was on a Sunday because, I had said that, I always liked in Chekhov how when the servants came on, they were the most interesting characters, but you couldn't follow them. You were always stuck with the masters upstairs, and how it would be great to have a play where, the audience would get to decide who they wanted to follow. Like, why should it be left to the tyranny of the author? And then that was one tract of this discussion. As I said, there was drinking, and the other was really just Toronto was coming up with a theater festival, a first international theater festival, and there's a sense that our young company, Necessary Angel, should try to do something. I suppose this was the genesis. Here was in 1980, and. But of course, we didn't have a theater, and finding a venue was a problem. And we talked about somehow Castle Loma, which is this landmark, huge castle that was bankrupted some guy at the turn of the century, some arms manufacturer. And it's open, for sort of weddings and high school graduation parties and for tours, I suppose. Anyway, I thought, what if we could use an actual building? And then we started, talking about, like, you could, and we originally thought of it as, I guess this goes back to the Middle Ages, when in their sort of processional plays that they did, where you would move from one location to the next. But then as soon as we got there around 3:00 on a Sunday afternoon, and we were running around this house, and we were kind of drunk. And, we say, hey, we could do a scene in this swimming pool, and we could do one here and there. And suddenly, like, it all that and the Chekhov conversation all sort of came together, and we started thinking about, doing this, a play in this venue, which we ultimately, didn't get. We couldn't afford it. But, and then the whole idea of the simultaneity of the action and the multiple characters, all of that sort of came from there. And concurrent to that, I, at the time, was making a living as the buyer for a bookstore in Toronto. And people would just, sales reps would give me new books, and to try to encourage me to buy vast quantities of them. And I started reading about Tamara de Lempicka because that there had been an art book on her, and little was known about her. But so to supplement the art book, with they used excerpts from the diary of this guy Gabriele D'Annunzio's housekeeper, and I was kind of reading them, and it was deliciously wicked stuff, very gossipy and fun. And it seemed to me, I remember talking to Richard, like, when we're rich and famous, this will be the Visconti movie that we make, and then that found its way into our Castle Loma discussions and our Chekhov discussions, and suddenly it became clear that I should write a play about Gabriele D'Annunzio and Tamara de Lempicka's visit to his house, and that was sort of the genesis of it. But we didn't have any intellectual framework in terms of how we were going to sort of blow up narrative and all of that stuff. We were just trying to think from an audience's point of view. I mean, my first play was about a poet named John Krizanc who hates the theater. And so I think I was still doing the same thing. Like, Richard's like my oldest friend from high school. He picked me up hitchhiking, and at the time he was doing musical theater, and I was reading Jean Genet. And somehow I corrupted him, and he became a theater director, so we've always had this kind of, like, I've always had a love-hate thing with the theater. Like, I really don't like the bounds. Like, I actually am a no proscenium guy through and through, and even when I do a play on a pros stage, people say, like, it's a 3-ring circus, So I just can't, my brain just can't be contained into those little boxes somehow. So I'm very sympathetic to the audience. And in fact, the greatest achievement to me of Tamara is just how animated it makes the audience. I mean, it's just a form that is so much better than the actual script or anything that I've done.
The LA run was like 9 years. Do you remember when it went from being a hit to kind of being an institution? Because 9 years is a long run for any show that isn't Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you have to take into account unlike Phantom, which, you can get 4,000 people a night into those big Broadway houses, or 3,000. I think you can get 115 or 20 people into Tamara, so you can sell out for a good long time. I think the bigger problem was just, this was before the internet, so it was very hard to create demand. I mean, to get the momentum, when you the word of mouth, to build that out, that took like a year, at least. It became self-sustaining after a time, but like, if you look at a show like Sleep No More, it can keep going, and it has this social media life, but they don't have to advertise. Like, they don't have to do a full page ad in the LA Times or New York Times, whatever.
Did the show at the time, either in Toronto, LA, or New York, did it inspire any imitators, people trying to copy the format? That's something I haven't caught any wind of.
I mean, no. In short, no. I mean, there are shows like Tony and Tina's Wedding, for instance.
Knew you were going to say that. Just in the second we start. Yeah.
Right. They came out, I think, just after us. We had opened first in Toronto, and they came out a little later. But again, they're not really doing. They are immersive. But they're not interactive. I mean, this is the difference with Tamara and most of the other shows, is it's a completely scripted show. Like, and the reason that most people don't do it is they're not stupid enough to write a 500-page script. I mean, it's just, I would never have done it had I known what I was in for. And, the whole, doing it in Toronto, I mean, like, I'd be wandering down the hall, and then there'd be an actor just standing there, and I was like, well, what are you doing here? He says, well, I got 2 minutes with nothing to say. Like, oh shit, I better write some dialogue, and all of that stuff had to slowly be filled in, and we'd have to, figure out how to make this story sort of seamless. And, you have to rewrite it for every house you do it in, because the timing gets all screwed up. And it's from a writer's point of view, it's just a lot of work.
The play itself, I think we'll wrap with this question. So you're in Toronto, 1980. You're writing this for debut in 81. We're coming out of the 70s. You're writing a play about Italy in the grip of fascism, X number of decades after the fact. It's such a radically different time. The moment we're in right now, though, it feels like everything that's old is new again. And that there's maybe a dialogue between the current moment and Tamara that maybe even wasn't present at the time that the play was first produced?
Yeah, no, I think I've sort of always tend to write about art, sex, and politics in various guises, I suppose. And the struggle between like love and duty is sort of thematically of great interest to me. Part of my reason was I was kind of interested. Well, I was interested in two different aspects of it. One, my dad had casually kind of mentioned. Now, my dad was Slovene, and his dad was certainly a Nazi sympathizer, if not a Nazi. And my dad had run away from home because he wouldn't say Heil Hitler. And he had ended up in Italy, and he got arrested in Italy. And no, before he got arrested, he put up posters, he said, for the fascists. I said, well, why would you put up posters for the fascists? He said, well, they paid twice as much as the communists. And then eventually he gets arrested, and he spent the war as a DP. You know, he was digging trenches as a prisoner, a German prisoner, and then he escaped and came back to Slovenia, where his brother was a communist who denounced him. And it was this very political sort of thing. And my dad had to escape Slovenia, and a big story. So I was very interested in the whole aspect of like, well, what would you do? And would you, D'Annunzio was a guy, like they said he was the one man who could have stopped Mussolini's rise to power. And he was a writer. And then but he got bought out, basically. They said to Mussolini, what are you going to do about D'Annunzio? Because, he's a major threat to the fascist movement. And he said, if you have a tooth that hurts, you either pull it out or fill it with gold. And he just basically bought D'Annunzio off. He gave him this house. He kept him in cocaine. He had a procuress for him that found all the women the guy could ever want. He had a live-in string quartet, a live-in architect, and the state published his complete works. All he had to do was keep his mouth shut and not say anything against Mussolini. So I was intrigued. Like, what would I do? I mean, would you sell out for the money, the filthy lucre? Well, I don't know. I've made a career, writing crappy TV shows, so I probably that speaks for itself. But at the time, that was a real struggle for me. Do you pursue art? And what is the role of the artist in society? And you're right. I mean, it seems much more relevant when I look at Tamara too around the world. Tamara ran for like 5 years in Rio, and the same in Argentina. It ran for a couple of years in Mexico City. It seems wherever there's kind of the move to the right, it becomes a kind of interesting touchstone for people, and it tries to capture that kind of the naissance of the fascist personality. I think at the time I was reading Wilhelm Reich and the Mass Psychology of Fascism and a lot of books like that, and so they sort of spilled into the unfolding drama.
Well, I think that it does ring true, and it's an OG immersive production, to say the least, and just to have it being republished right now is really kind of a gift to the form itself, because so many people, they just go like, but how would I even start? How would I structure it? Like,
I think it is exactly that. How do you even start? Like, all I know is you write the one scene, and then I would always say, like, okay, I got these 10 characters. Who's the most, I got one idea. These 2 people are having the following scene, but now I have 8 other people to deal with. What could they be up to? And I'll do a group scene. And you know what I mean? Like, and you do it in certain sections and move forward that way. But, I can't remember, how many times I kept phoning the director saying, okay, I know I said I was going to do this, but life is too short. It's too much, and A good reason the play was dedicated to Richard is because there's no way that any sane person would have just kept writing this thing.
Yeah.
It just was such an unwieldy beast to do as text. I kind of like immersive makes total sense to me. When you're creating environments and there's a lot more room there. I hope when we do Tamara again that it'll be much more in the immersive thing, but sort of I want to reinvent it a little bit if we reimagine it for Los Angeles.
Well, John, thank you so much for the time today. And
okay.
I'm so glad that the play's been republished.
Well, it's good. It's good to have it out there, and it's been fun to reminisce.
There's actually a lot more of that interview with John, and we'll be dropping that into the podcast feed a little later this month. There's actually, I think there's a number of things that need to go into the backer feed as well. So expect a bunch of stuff to get sprinkled in here. I'm taking a long, hard look at just what the kind of weekly rhythm and cadence of the show is. So expect the show to keep on mutating over the next few weeks. We've already slowed the cadence down on the big produced pieces, but those are not done, mostly because I really do enjoy making those. And I just want to make sure that they get out to as many people as possible. So I do feel ridiculous whenever I'm asking everyone to like and share. If I wanted to be a YouTube personality, I'd be a YouTube personality. But it does make a world of difference. So that little stinger I did earlier about please share, particularly the show. And when we get in the mode of breaking up some of the big pieces we've done, like the Meow Wolf piece and the Grassroots District piece, we're going to drop those out on their own at the appropriate times and let them breathe. And hopefully people will share them out when they're in kind of more digestible chunks. Experimentation, it's the name of the game. Keep it on. There is a fair amount going on right now. So much of it is tied to everyone just kind of reorienting around the Delta surge. We're in the planning stages of our 2022 Summit and Festival, which is planned right now for the top of January in Pasadena. This, of course, being the remounting or the actual fulfillment of our goal of the Summit and Festival that was going to be in March of 2020 before the pandemic came along. And like everyone else, we're taking a long, hard look at what's going on and how do you make plans. And I'm just really hoping that this surge is the last time we see a surge and that everyone just sort of takes it seriously now. And does what needs to be done in order to get this over with. There's been, I think it's really impacted live in certain places. Other places are just kind of YOLOing it, and that has an entirely separate set of consequences for YOLOing it. I've heard good things about the way that the vaccine mandate stuff is working in New York. New Yorkers are just like, yeah, here's another thing we got to do. And that started to be going to be the law of the land here in Los Angeles County. LA doesn't always make it easy when it comes to making this work. So hopefully this, weirdly enough, will actually make it easier for everyone to get work up. Because there's some really incredible stuff. I had the privilege of stepping on set this week. Over at one of the local Halloween time things, and that was for a piece that'll be coming up again. The produced pieces are still around. At the top of next month, we're going to drop that one, and I was totally blown away by what I was seeing on set. And I hope that everyone here in the Southland, who in our community, gets to check out that work. So it's still an exciting time, a weird time. A difficult time, and we're all very exhausted with it being difficult. I know I'm just gut punched, and I'm done. But please, thank you for wearing the mask, as I said, all pandemic long. And there is, kind of a repivot to digital. There's some interesting digital work that's going on right now. And I know some people, like our friend Siobhan O'Loughlin, is, pivoting out of doing her live work right now, going back into doing digital. Third Rail Projects has some digital work that's coming up. I think those tickets are on sale and it's live right now. We're getting a chance to check that out later in the month, and there'll be reviews. They wanted that later in the run, so we're just all still figuring out as we go along, like everybody else. But we're not going anywhere. Yeah. All right. This has been a very classic No Pro ramble. Coffee's not working, I guess. Let's do the credits, shall we? That's what this part of the show's usually been. A little bit of the old in the new, as it were. The sustaining backers of No Proscenium are Ari Herstand, Brittany, Deborah Robinson, Elaine, Emily Gillette, Lonnie Hansen, Paul Farnell, Mark Baltazar, Samuel Mustry, Sydney Guillory, and Jan Budman. Thank you all for helping me pay my rent. You can join them at patreon.com/noproscenium. Every bit helps. The associate producer for this show is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society here in Los Angeles. Indeed, special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. Catherine Yu is the executive editor at No Pro. Big shout out to everyone on the No Pro team. Thank you all for doing what you do, and I'm glad you're finally listening to the show. They weren't listening. They're like, oh wow, you really changed it. It's like, I told you. My own people. See, I'm serious. You got to tell everyone. If you like it, you got to tell people. They don't know. It's just, we hated that. It's just no one talking. This part is, you wanted to go back? See, that's the thing. You want to go back to just me talking? Then don't share the show. There you go. If I can't use the carrot, I'll use the stick. This show is written, edited, hosted, produced, mixed, and grumpily dialogued by yours truly, Noah Nelson. And until next time, especially if you're at Without Walls this weekend, I will see you at the show.